I'd like to welcome you to today's afternoon session. We got a very good response, and obviously the solopreneurs and the SMEs are obviously navigating the economic climate and the inflationary meltdown and that kind of thing. And I think it's very important to really highlight in this discussion the importance and the essence of your people, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that are going to make or break your organization, come what may. So without further ado, I am going to ask Laila to please just, if you can introduce yourself and welcome. I'm really, really privileged to have you here today. I've been waiting with bated breath to actually have you speak on this fireside chat, because you come with such a wealth of information. And Laila and I actually worked together when she was at a previous organization. We struck up not only a professional relationship, but a personal relationship. And she's got values that are really, really important to her, but it also has come through very strongly in the manner in which she recruits and the resilience. With the resilience, she also recruits at the organization she's worked for in the past. But let me not waffle on here. Let me give you the floor, Laila, and if you can just go ahead and introduce yourself and your experience, your history, a little bit of background, just so people familiarize themselves with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Celeste. It's good to be here with you. I'm glad we've been able to maintain contact over the course of the last 2 years since we last collaborated together on an employer branding exercise at my previous employer, Span, which we'll talk about quite a bit during today's session. So I'm the head of people. I've held a head of people position for the last 8 years. The majority of that at Span, which is an American tech startup with development operations in Cape Town. And more recently, head of people at a AI tech startup, which is headquartered in Switzerland. My focus has always in this role been to scale startups, and I guess as well embed the people operations fundamentals into the organization in parallel. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. And what I enjoy about Laila is the fact that she has worked in a very, very competitive space in the tech and the IT sector, and has got the resilience and has really got the track record to have navigated, finding amazing talent for startups. And the success of the startups have been with her, obviously her intervention and her initiatives, and very, very proactive within LinkedIn, outside of not only being visually on top of the radar when she's actually looking for talent, but also engaging with her audience and nurturing her audience and keeping them informed of what she's up to within the organization on an ongoing basis. She doesn't go silent. And that's what I really enjoy about her. And if you have a look at her content, the content is really from the heart. It's from the heart, and the emotional connection that she infuses in terms of the kind of environment these people will be working for comes through very strongly as well. But let's, what I'm going to do is I'm putting a presentation up here, and it's really just to have a look at the different questions that we're going to pose to Laila, just in case other people do come on and they're wanting to know what question we are speaking to. So first of all, I think this is a very big question for many people that are running their startups, especially in the tech space, or people that are looking for the strong technical ability and skill, which I think everyone is at the moment. I'd love to understand how you leverage employer branding to actually compete for these high demand technical people, Laila, because yeah, we're in a very competitive space and everyone's looking for the same skill set or the tech stack, etc.
Celeste, let me start off by telling you a little bit about what that looked like in the early days of Span Digital Innovation, where I started my career as head of people. It's now 8 or 9 years ago. What was interesting about that particular organization was that we were in stealth mode, which meant that we were scaling without being allowed to announce who our clients were and the nature of the products we were working on, which is quite limiting because, as we know, one of the things that tech talent is looking at, one of the things that makes your employee value proposition as attractive as it should be, is that your technologists are doing interesting work for potentially interesting clients. So we were a services agency, and that left us with limited options in terms of what we could say to the outside market. So one of the things that we did was really focus on making our recruitment marketing attractive. So we had a copywriter assist us with our job descriptions. We made sure that they were somewhat edgy and alternative. We looked at how we can differentiate ourselves from what others in the market were doing. And we spent a considerable amount of time making sure that those job descriptions really appealed to the kind of engineers that we were looking for. So we were looking for people that weren't particularly interested in working for corporates, that weren't interested in doing run-of-the-mill maintenance kind of work, innovative, the smartest, the cream of the crop kind of talent. And initially, with the limited brand awareness that we had, it was really a numbers game. So a lot of the energy and focus needed to go in identifying technologists in South Africa and reaching out to them. What went hand in hand with that for us at that stage was creating events in which we could promote the caliber of technologists that we currently had in the organization. So I identified a number of relevant meetups that we could partner with at that stage, meetups that would attract the kind of talent that we were looking for. So we promoted our own technologists to speak at various events, at various meetup events, specifically the deep learning, machine learning, back-end, front-end, React, entire tech stack that we were recruiting at that stage. So the handful of people we did have with us would then go out there and promote their skill set in a non-obvious kind of way. And then we'd throw events at our offices as well, knowing that our people that I would then ask to remain at the event could also act as spokespersons or spokespeople, ambassadors to Span, and interact and engage with the talent that was attending these meetings. And then in addition to that, we identified conferences at which we could put our people forward to act as speakers. The talent that we already had on hand at that stage was quite high. So they were more than able to present at those conferences. Those conferences then we recorded, we created professional content out of those conferences, and then started amplifying those posts via our various networks and those conference networks and meetup networks. A big part of getting our brand out there at that stage was, what's the word I'm looking for? Networking. Networking with the organizers, with industry leaders, with thought leaders, with the who's who of the tech space in the Western Cape at that stage.
Okay, wonderful. It's fabulous. And I think, if anything, yeah, if anything, folks, you can hear that there's alternate recruitment marketing activity that Laila's actually highlighted. Yeah, it's not the run of the mill. It's innovative. It's yeah, it's alternate, and it's also not the regular knee-jerk reaction of just shoving ads onto job boards and that kind of thing. She's really, you know, you really were creating opportunity out there over and above what the regular run-of-the-mill would do. So thanks for sharing that. That's great stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to just hold your questions to the end so that we don't run out of time. I want Laila to obviously get through as many questions as possible, and then we can reflect on that afterwards, folks. So the next question is really around how have you built a compelling business case for employer branding to startup founders? Obviously, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about, especially at early phase and that, you looking at holding on to the purse strings quite tightly. And if your founders are not sort of sold on what really employer branding is all about, or just don't get it, or they're not on board, it's usually quite a hard sell, Laila, and it's always viewed as a non-essential. Or it's often viewed as a non-essential financial burden. But I view startups as actually sort of being on the edge when it comes to not being a legacy brand, but a cutting edge brand that's really moving mountains and that. So is it that difficult? How difficult is it to actually present your business case when it comes to co-founders and or founders? How do you actually get around that?
Yeah, I think I've been quite lucky working for organizations and partnering with founders and CEOs that understand the space quite well, really progressive leaders. And going back to Span, I think in the early days, a lot of the efforts, you know, there were returns on it. What did happen, however, and when we felt the need to really ramp up our employer branding was when you and I worked together. And the reason that I reached out to you, and you were highly recommended via industry contact, was that we'd come out of the pandemic. Until that point in time, our retention rate was incredibly high. We were losing about 3% of our people per annum, which is pretty unprecedented in the tech industry. And all of a sudden, that figure went up to 35%. And we were at real risk in the business. It was an existential risk of losing our folks because of global mobility, opening the markets. The world was open to our South African talent. We were losing people to European businesses that were all paying in euros. So that in itself, and the risk to the sustainability of the business, and that was pretty obvious to our founders and our CEOs. And I didn't have to make too much of a case. It was as simple as, if we do not get the right people on board, and if we don't succeed in retaining the people that we've developed in our organization and who are incredibly valuable to us, then there's a substantial risk to us continuing sustaining as well as growing the business. During the pandemic, we'd had quite a bit of success growing the business, but that was all coming to a risk, you know, after the pandemic.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes absolute sense. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I remember us starting our journey together, and it's obviously the organization was at risk. We had to turn that around quite quickly. And I think really leveraging off your valued resources that sort of remained behind, it was to really get their voice out there on amplifying what it was like to actually work for your organization and the upside around it. So utilizing them as brand advocates to validate your offering.
We'd had quite a bit of success with using our employees as brand ambassadors and right? And I think organic marketing via those channels was one of our successes. And a lot of that had to do with understanding what our technologists want and need. So that kind of in-depth knowledge of what your target market is about is essential. And what that translated into was creating an incredible culture for them. And from that came them referring us, speaking highly of us, telling their friends in the network about us. In addition to that, providing a really good recruitment experience also set us apart and differentiated us from a vast number of organizations in the market. The amount of referrals we received just from creating an exceptional recruitment experience also can't be ignored.
And I can vouch for that, because when I was actually running those discussion forums, the conversations that I had, especially with regard to the newbies, they really affirmed that. They said at the end of the day, first of all, we didn't know the brand as well as we would have liked to have known. But once we were actually going through the recruitment process and being taken through that funnel, we could not fault it. It was customer excellence to the T. So again, you know, it's really not about just shouting off the rooftops or informing and shaping the brand. It's about really taking, having that seamless approach to joining that message out there on social media, to actually landing on the ground and ensuring that there's a frictionless process and a memorable almost journey, so that they can obviously also spread the word. And obviously, as we know, word of mouth is so strong, so powerful.
Okay.
So thanks for that. Okay, how have you seen startups sort of missing the boat in terms of potential opportunity if they have neglected on actually leveraging on employer branding and recruitment marketing at that early stage, and they've really been mainly focused on pushing product and service?
I think we've touched a bit on this already, that the risk of not prioritizing your branding as early as possible is that you will struggle to attract the talent that your business needs in time for when your business needs it. And that is wasted opportunity, that's wasted money, that's wasted resources, that's delays and frustrations and inefficiencies. The sooner you create a brand, the better ultimately. For me, it's quite obvious that sometimes more of a business case needs to be made for that. I think a large part of this also comes from the kind of CEO or leader you partner with. You know, you want to, right?
Yeah, correct. Because obviously as a startup, the first thing you're focusing on is we actually need to start making revenue. So immediately you go to your product and service brand, your consumer brand, you push there. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, often with your founders or your CEOs failing to understand that without the right people behind your product or service, it's not going to be sustainable, or it's not going to get off to a good start. So I think the two are almost like inseparable, would you say, Laila, in terms of running the two, but giving equal attention to both your employer brand alongside your product or your service brand?
Yeah. What comes to mind as well is just how quickly companies jump to using recruitment agencies and how that cost itself could be avoided by investing in this area. You don't want externals representing your organization. You want your own internal team representing your organization. You want that intellectual property and that market knowledge to sit internally. Also, there are very few recruitment agencies that can not promote that can really do your brand justice. I think I've probably worked with one or two of them in my entire career that I trust with that. So again, just weighing up the pros and cons of where you invest your money and why.
Correct. And I think it's also about the longevity and having a look at the runway, Laila, you know what I mean? In terms of, well, we might be able to get a bum in seat for this critical role. What about the sustainability when that team starts growing out? You're going to have to spend more money on sort of an external option, as opposed to leveraging your assets internally. And that newbie that's just come on board and can actually articulate and spread the word of what it's like being there within a startup and the upside. So almost treat them as an ambassador.
Yeah. What's painfully obvious to me is just how reactive and short-term talent acquisition branding strategies really are. One needs to have far more foresight, and one needs to take one's leaders on that same journey to be able to prepare for not just what's happening in the next 6 months, but how do you want to position your business in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
I love that. Yeah. And I can't agree with you more. And I think, especially in times of uncertainty and that, you know, to be able to sort of pave that way. I mean, alongside the business objectives and goals of a startup, you know, on how you're going to sustain through all these, you know, jumping through all these hoops and that. I think that also, you know, ties in with what you say there.
Yeah. And Celeste, there's quite a bit at the moment out there in terms of how do startups bounce back from this economic downturn? How many of them have had to let workers go, right? Massive amount of layoffs, and there's hardly an organization that's been untouched by that. And an employer brand will stand you in good stead to overcome that, you know, that issue. Once layoffs have taken place, what do you have to fall back on? How do you bounce back? How do you recover?
Absolutely. But I think, to your point again, you have to be intentional about it. You have to actually have it strategically planned. It can't be a knee-jerk reaction on, oh dear, something's happened. Yeah, let's just, you know, put something out there to counteract what went down kind of thing. Exactly. So it's really having that foresight. It's having that almost like that employer brand reputational management phase as well, in case things do go amiss, or go off key or something to that effect as well. Okay, I'm going to move on because I'm cognizant of time. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'd rather we can always backtrack and chat more to our folk. You know, I'm sure there's definitely going to be lots of questions coming through. So again, we might very well have covered this in our previous questions, but let's run through it anyway, because this was a question I wanted to position with you. How do you leverage your personal brand to establish a connection between your employer brand and your employer value proposition? Going beyond, and again, to our previous point, just that knee-jerk reaction of, oh dear, we need to fill this role. Oh dear, we need to acquire some software developers or a business analyst or full stack developer, etc., etc. How do you keep that passive talent engaged with your employer brand outside of when you are only recruiting?
This is an interesting one for me. Personal brand. I only recently, in the past year and a half or 2 years since the pandemic, started focusing on my personal brand in terms of a brand to the outside market. In terms of my internal organizational brand, that's always been a focus for me. Understanding that internally and externally, I'm the face and the voice of the organization. So whatever all of my behaviors, all of my knowledge sharing, be that internal or external, how I engage my internal or external audience, all has to be aligned with the company's brand, with their EVP. If I have credibility, by virtue thereof, so does the organization that I represent. Does that answer your question?
Completely. But I think what's really, obviously we connected on LinkedIn, and I think what I've really enjoyed is the extra, how forthcoming you are when it comes to, you know, anything around something that's either topical or not topical, but anything around maybe leadership. And it doesn't necessarily, it might or might not necessarily reflect on what's happening with your organization at that point in time, whether it be leadership, purpose, diversity and inclusion, upskilling, whatever. What I enjoy is the fact that there's conversations that you are happening, that you are involved in, and it's not a knee-jerk reaction. It's food for thought that you are actually providing your passive talent market with. Yeah. So they can actually have time to say, you know, I agree with. So you're engaging. You are engaging on your thoughts, but it's very thought-provoking, and it also gives people an opportunity to engage with you and say, you know, I like what you say, or I never thought of it that way. So that ongoing engagement, that proactivity behind your personal brand is what I really enjoy. And I think that, again, this is such missed opportunity for people out there if they are wanting to build their personal brand credibility. And yes, I'm talking about externally. I'm not talking about it internally. Obviously, internally, it's equally as important. But I'm saying within the talent acquisition space, if you've already got a following of people that are engaging with you, and you have got the attention as a thought leader, a credible thought leader, it not only builds your own personal brand positioning and credibility, but it also, they associate you with your organization, and they think, wow, you know, Jua's really got a win. Yeah, they've really got a win in having Laila as their head of people, because she really knows her thing. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on the part of talent acquisition specialists, and especially now, you know, that there is AI. You obviously want to keep it unique, authentic, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But there is no reason to not be visible outside of just running a talent acquisition or talent advertising campaign, or whatever you're trying to get for the organization. Yeah, I think it's, and that's what I've seen how you have developed in that regard. And folks, you need to have a look at Laila's LinkedIn profile, connect with her, just have a look. She's a perfect example of a great employer brand advocate, ambassador, influencer, when it comes to talent acquisition for her organization. It's worth having a look at her profile and look at how she's posting all the time. She's posting. And I really find it, I mean, I've shared your post in the past as well, because I think to myself, wow, you know, I've never thought of it that way. And I want to share your thinking as a head of people in my network, because it's valuable information. And I almost would like them to ignite with other heads of people to actually say, gee, I need to start writing more, or gee, I need to start, you know, sharing my thoughts more.
It has to be quite intentional though. And you're right. Some thought does go into what exactly does my target market want to hear more about.
Correct.
It's easy to create trite, superficial content, but you do want to set yourself apart as sharing something that's really relevant to your audience. And that requires some thought.
It does. But I think what it also does, more importantly, is it creates the emotional connection that a brand can't do on its own. An employer brand can't do that on its own. Someone like yourself as an influencer and an employer brand marketer can actually bring that home by way of attaching the emotional connection to the organization.
Celeste, you know what one also can't ignore? I just remembered something else now. In my current organization at Jua, our leaders in general are all brand ambassadors. So again, I'm fortunate enough to work in an organization where all of our leaders bring some really valuable, highly sought after skills. They're bright, they have voices, and they all in their own capacity do the same that I do, and that is create regular content for their audiences. So they gain credibility as well. So it's not a one-man job. It is, I think, in many cases, a group team effort to amplify the organization in that way.
And again, you have hit on something that is very achievable, especially when it comes to startups, in that if you are small enough, you can actually rally your people together to do that. Start instilling that behavior right from the start in order to get that whole mind shift and that whole adopt the whole thing around employer branding and influencers and advocacy. Because again, it's the trusted voice of your employees that count. And when you go out to market, or if one of your leaders do go out to market, they're not a stranger. They're a recognizable personal brand that people actually can engage with because they've been following them as a thought leader, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I see there's questions coming through here, but we can tackle them afterwards. What are the key factors to consider when you choose an employer branding consultancy, especially during initial stages of your startup journey? And this might not be, it might not necessarily be specifically around what, for example, Employer Branding Africa does, but it could be even as far as almost like affiliate support partners that help you with mental well-being and financial well-being and anything that appeals to possibly your intangible benefits as well, when it comes to employer branding or your value proposition to support you. Make sense?
I hear a few questions in that one, but we did make use of affiliates in that regard by bringing in financial wellness and health wellness specialists to create a fantastic brand. I mean, not brand culture. But in terms of identifying a good employer branding agency, all I can speak of is the experience I've had with you, Celeste. And you are one of the few consultancies in South Africa that comes highly recommended. One has choices of larger corporate organizations to partner with, but I'd warn against utilizing them not only for cost purposes, but also that I don't believe organizations like that really understand what a startup environment requires, and partnering with a smaller agency makes more sense. And just from that standpoint. So what it is we looked for was a good reputation, a good track record of potentially even having worked with similar organizations within the same sector. Somebody who understands how to partner. So somebody with great communication and collaboration skills. One of the things that struck me during working with you was just how many stakeholders internally you need to get on board. You need to get onto the same page, from your senior leadership team to your employees to marketing, to the HR team, obviously, or the people operations team. So collaboration, the ability to collaborate successfully is really important. And then on the partnership side, it's an ongoing exercise, your employer branding. It's not a once-off effort. So you don't spend one to 3 months on it and then you're set for life. Your brand is ever evolving and ever changing. So ideally, you want to partner with somebody that you can do that journey with in the long term. Not to say it'll be a monthly touch base, but every few months or once a year, you will be checking in with your employer branding consultant to ensure that you are still communicating relevant messages.
Great, thank you for that. And I think it's, you know, to your point, it is about getting all your stakeholders on board, because you might have a champion in you that's actually put your hand up and said, this is what we want to embark upon. But it's been able to almost like coach and mentor and travel with you on that journey to get buy-in from all those functional heads, but also your co-founders as well. Because, you know, your success is my success as well, in terms of landing your whole employer branding implementation. Yeah. Because you, at the end of the day, have to say, these are the measurables, these are the metrics, and this is how we're going to deliver on it. So that business case, as much as it might not be a hard sell, you're still answerable to your co-founders that are holding very, very tightly onto those purse strings, especially if they're not 100% convinced. But if you can show them little wins along the way, which is, I think, what we managed to achieve that, and there's activity and you're keeping it on the radar all the time, all of a sudden they see progress, even if it is, you know, at little steps at a time. Right. They want to see that progress.
Right. And if I recall, one of the activities that we did in which you engaged our ex-employees or candidates that had been declined on our recruitment journey, right? That was one of the ways to validate and verify and get more information about, were we on track? Were we missing anything in terms of our brand? Right?
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. How are we doing for time, Laila? I know that we can talk the hind leg of a donkey. We've been behaving ourselves today. we haven't gone too overboard there. So I think those are the last of the questions there. And I hope you found this valuable, because I think if you actually, you know, talk is cheap until you actually hear a number of factors. And, you know, whether it be starting out there as a founder organization and being limited to what you can actually package in terms of your value proposition, because you might have founders that are saying, you know, we can't give our IP away. And we need to focus on the good stuff, but it's very difficult because we can't tell who our clients are. We can't tell what our IP is. So it's really about saying, how do we actually package this and take it to market convincingly and compellingly? And it's not always, it is quite challenging if you're leading like you were, Laila, because I remember coming at you and saying, okay, can we do this? Can you do that? And you were saying, no, my co-founders and my founders are not comfortable with that. And I'm saying, but why not? That will give you the uniqueness. That will give you the edge. So it is challenging to a certain degree, because you can't disclose that, but yet at the same time, we know that in the tech space, those projects are what really blows your techies' hair back. They want to know. They want to know that, you know, what is the juicy stuff they're working on? And if they're limited to understanding that, how do you actually put that edgy, sort of tantalizing ingredient out there as part of your value proposition? So that's the first thing. I think the fact that you have highlighted so many other multi-channels to get to finding those golden nuggets, those individuals that you're wanting to bring into your organization. It's about clever and smart thinking. It's once again not doing the usual run of the mill, but actually putting yourself out there and drawing on and rallying your team of experts together, because at the end of the day, they are your brand advocates. You can only do so much, but if you can actually land the whole employer value proposition, and I think this is where you also did exceptionally well, is you had a strong voice within your organization. If you have a strong voice within your organization, you are able to influence to the benefit of those co-founders to getting their brand out there. And that was a big factor as well. So the hard sell of employer branding has to happen internally and externally, as far as I'm concerned. As strong as your voice is internally will actually get you to creating that traction externally. So that's the other thing. The fact that you had progressive leaders was fantastic. I think timing-wise, you know, again, it might be a hard sell, it might not be a hard sell. It depends actually on where your challenges lie presently. And as you say, the picture changes continuously. When you're in COVID, and I worked with on a number of projects during COVID, with SPAN being one of them, everyone had a distinct reason for why they wanted to build their employer brand and their value proposition. And they focused on that, and we were able to deliver on that. Whether it was retention, whether it was, you know, showing reward and recognition to those poor people that were coming in on the front line and still having to work on factory floors, etc., they still did it. And that brand is still living. So again, the hard sell in the business case is really dependent on where you're at. It's a place in time. And then actually hitting the ground with building an employer brand and a value proposition simultaneously to taking your product and service to market is almost, if you have got a clean canvas and you are a startup, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing it together. Because I can guarantee you that your legacy big corporate brands, you'll be far ahead of them, because they normally do it the way around, obviously. And naturally, as a startup, you would want to put your product and service brand out there first. That's the immediate thing, unless you start thinking, you know, about the employer brand. Your internal organizational brand and the fact that you were a credited voice, that was a big factor as well. And again, to your point of harnessing the collective of your brand leaders, of your co-founders, put them at the forefront. That's what people want to hear. People want to hear what makes these co-founders, these startups tick, because I want to be like them one day. So why not utilize their voice? And then thank you for the compliments on, you know, utilizing Employer Branding Africa as your preferred partner. I think we had a lot of trials and tribulations. It wasn't an easy time, but I think we're sitting on this call today to actually pay tribute to that and say, well done, we got through it. You know, whether it was me sitting and speaking to San Francisco at unearthly hours and speaking to your leaders that were very stuck in their ways, you know, but we did it. We actually did it. And it was a remarkable journey, and lots of lessons learned.
Indeed.
So yeah, so that's really the wrap up. Okay, let me just stop sharing and then there we go. Let me see if there's what questions have come through here. Anyone want any questions?
Celeste, can I come off mute and ask a question? I'm already off mute.
Hello, Karen. Lovely to see you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the session, and Laila, lovely journey, and thanks for sharing so much with us. I'm really interested to understand for your journey, I think in your previous role, what were some of the key KPIs you tracked initially to talk to your success? Because obviously you obviously did a business case to get budget, and you want to be able to share with the business the return on investment for that budget. Just interested to get a sense of what were some of your KPIs that you tracked.
It's a difficult question. What did I track?
I know there are so many variables, but yeah, just in terms of showcasing the success.
I suppose a lot of it had to do around talent acquisition, looking at our pipeline and how many high quality, quality of hires, looking what the impact of that would be on the caliber of candidates we could bring on board and how quickly we could employ people. Because typically in my industry, or in tech, I don't know which industry you belong to, Taryn, it can take several months to bring really high caliber people on board. So it was that as well as retention. So retention was the part where we were really feeling the pain. As mentioned, retention went from attrition went from 3% to, what was it, 40%. So to get our talent to remain within the organization, I think those were the two most important areas for us.
Yeah, I also seem to recollect that, but I think the other measurables was really to understand why the people were leaving, obviously, and understanding whether values were still speaking to those people, and if not, why not. I think timing-wise, Taryn, as well, it wasn't a great time. It was open season for many, because all of a sudden people saw we were working in a borderless environment, so it was free for all, and there was a lot of recruitment, a lot of stuff happening, a lot of people moving around within the talent market space and that. So, and as I say, with COVID, people were hanging on to their people especially with everyone working remotely. So again, with employer branding, and I think you can vouch for this, Karen, it's a moving target all the time. Even now, the times that we're living in at the moment, how valid and how relevant is your EVP to address the people's emotional disposition, but also their tangible, wants and needs. And yeah, again, the measurables, it could have been quite different for Span now. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's moving all the time.
No, couldn't agree more. And could I just maybe ask one last question? Just Laila mentioned obviously one of the elements she gave focus to was around recruitment marketing and really working with a copywriter to get those, either the job adverts or job descriptions aligned to the business. Did you see the benefits of that in terms of the hiring funnel, that you got more applications coming through, people considering because of that effort? Yeah.
Yes, Taryn, it's incredibly difficult finding somebody who can translate your voice, right? And so it's not a small feat finding the right person to do it.
Absolutely.
But I know that it was effective because a number of people over the course of all of those years kept on saying, your ad was so catchy. It really caught my attention. And then the following things that you said in your ad were really catchy. So we only mildly changed that job description or the various job descriptions and the pitch over the course of the years because it was so good.
Thanks, Laila. Thanks, Celeste.
Only a pleasure. Any other questions from the floor? No? Gee, we finished early. I thought we were going to run over. Okay. All right. So if there are no more questions, you are welcome to, you've got my email address. You know where to find me on LinkedIn as well. If you want to continue the discussion with myself, or you want to reach out to Laila as well, I'm sure she'll be just too open to sharing her knowledge in that. And as I say, please have a look at her personal brand. Have a look at her profile, and as you'll see, it's not the run of the mill. It's engaging and it's interesting, and yeah, she serves as a good example to the talent market.
Thanks so much, Celeste.
Only a pleasure. Only a pleasure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting. So I'm hoping to apply some of these in my capacity as well. So thank you.
Only a pleasure. Only a pleasure. I'm glad you found it worthy.